The rescue ship landed on Kelvar 7, just as the planet's sun began to dim forever. Commander Jake Morrison watched through the viewport as his team moved quickly through the ruins of what had once been a thriving city. Time was running out. In less than 3 hours, the planet's core would collapse completely. "Commander, we found something," crackled the voice of Lieutenant Amy Chen through the radio. "Underground shelter, Sector 4. You need to see this." Jake made his way down into the dark tunnels beneath the dead city. His boots echoed on stone floors as he followed the light from his team's equipment. When he reached the shelter, he stopped in his tracks. 12 pairs of large, gleaming eyes stared back at him from the darkness. They belonged to small creatures huddled together in the corner of the room. Children. Alien children with soft fur and delicate features. They looked terrified. "They're alone," Amy whispered. She was kneeling a few feet away from the group, her hand extended slowly. "No adults anywhere. I think these are all that's left." Dr. Paul Rodriguez moved forward with his medical scanner. The device beeped softly as it analyzed the children. "They're severely malnourished," he said quietly. "We need to get them to the ship now." The evacuation happened quickly. The children were too weak to resist or run. They let the humans carry them up to the surface and into the waiting rescue ship. Within an hour, the team was lifting off, leaving the dying world behind. The 12 children were placed in the medical bay, each in a clean bed with warm blankets. Jake thought the hard part was over. He was wrong. Helen Martinez, the ship's food specialist, had prepared special meals for the children. She had worked with the science team to create a nutrient paste that would be safe for their biology. It had everything they needed: proteins, vitamins, minerals. The scanner said it was perfect for them. The children refused to touch it. "They won't eat," Helen told Jake the next morning. Her face showed frustration and worry. "I've tried everything. Different temperatures. Different colors. I even tried adding flavors. They just turn away." Jake went to the medical bay to see for himself. The 12 children lay in their beds, barely moving. Trays of food sat untouched beside each bed. The nutrient paste looked gray and thick in the bowls. Nurse Katie Sullivan sat beside one of the older children. His fur was dark blue, almost cobalt. The humans had started calling him Blue. Katie held a spoon near his mouth, trying to coax him to eat. "Please," she said softly. "You need food. We're trying to help you." Blue's eyes looked at her for a moment. Then his gaze shifted to something behind her. His nostrils flared. For the first time since coming aboard, he looked interested in something. Katie turned to see what had caught his attention. Lieutenant Greg Barnes stood near the door, eating his lunch while reading a report on his tablet. He had a sandwich in one hand. Just a simple sandwich from the crew kitchen. Nothing fancy. Bread, meat, and some vegetables. Blue's entire body tensed. His eyes locked onto that sandwich. Katie noticed immediately. "Greg," she called out.
"Can you come here?"
Greg looked up, confused but willing. He walked over to Blue's bedside. The child's eyes never left the sandwich. His breathing quickened, then it happened. Blue's hand shot out faster than anyone expected. He grabbed the sandwich right out of Greg's hand. The whole medical bay went silent. Blue held the stolen food against his chest, looking around at the humans as if expecting them to take it back. When no one moved, he slowly brought the sandwich to his mouth and took a bite. The change was instant. Blue's eyes went wide. He started eating with desperate hunger, finishing the sandwich in seconds. His small body seemed to come alive. "Well," Greg said, staring at his empty hand. "That's interesting." Katie grabbed her communication device. "Commander Morrison, you need to come to Medical Bay right now. Something just happened." Jake arrived within minutes. By then, Helen had brought regular human food from the crew kitchen. Simple things: more sandwiches, pieces of fruit, basic crackers. She placed them near the other children. The reaction was the same with all 12. The moment they smelled human food, they perked up. They ignored their carefully prepared nutrient paste and reached for the sandwiches and fruit. They ate like they hadn't seen food in days. "I don't understand," Helen said, watching them eat. "The scan said the nutrient paste was good for them. Why do they want our food instead?" Dr. Rodriguez watched his medical monitor. The children's vital signs were improving with every bite they took. "Maybe it's not about what's scientifically best," he said slowly. "Maybe it's about something else." Jake watched the smallest child, a pale creature with fur that looked almost white. Amy had approached her carefully and was now helping her eat a piece of apple. The child took the fruit with small hands and bit into it. Her face showed pure joy. "At least they're eating now," Jake said. "That's what matters." The medical team stayed busy for the next few hours. They brought more human food and watched as the children ate everything offered to them. Some of the cubs even started to explore their surroundings, moving from their beds for the first time. Blue climbed out and walked over to Greg, looking up at him hopefully. "I think he wants more food," Greg said with a smile. He knelt down and offered Blue a cracker. The child took it carefully, then surprised everyone by sitting down right next to Greg's feet. He ate the cracker while leaning against the human's leg. "They're bonding with us," Amy observed. She was sitting on the floor now with 3 of the smaller cubs gathered around her. They watched her eat a sandwich, their eyes following every movement. When she broke off pieces and offered them, the cubs took the food gently from her fingers. Katie brought more supplies from the kitchen. The cubs watched every crew member who entered the room. They seemed particularly interested when they saw humans eating. One rust-colored cub reached out toward Katie's lunch tray, making a small sound. "Here you go, little one," Katie said, breaking off a piece of her bread and handing it over. The cub took it eagerly and made what might have been a happy noise. As evening approached, all 12 children had eaten well for the first time since their rescue. Their beds were surrounded by empty plates and cups. Some of the cubs had fallen asleep, looking peaceful and full. Others were still awake, watching the humans with curious eyes. Jake called a meeting with his senior staff. "We need to figure out what's happening here," he said. "Why do they prefer human food? Is it safe for them long term? We're 3 days from the nearest station. We need answers." "I'll run more tests," Dr. Rodriguez offered. "Analyze both the foods they're eating and their reactions to it. Maybe there's something we missed." "I'll adjust our food supplies," Helen added. "If they're going to keep eating human food, we need to make sure we have enough for them and the crew. And we need to understand why," Amy said. "It's not just about hunger. Did you see how they reacted? They weren't just eating. They were happy, comfortable, like the food meant something more to them than just nutrition." Jake nodded. "Get me answers. These children have been through enough. I want to make sure we're doing right by them." After the meeting ended, Jake returned to the medical bay one more time. Most of the cubs were sleeping now. Blue was curled up near the door as if waiting for Greg to return. The smallest cub, the pale one, had claimed a spot near where Amy usually sat. Another had Katie's medical jacket bundled up like a pillow. They looked peaceful. For children who had lost everything, who had watched their world die, they looked surprisingly content. Jake made a silent promise to them. Whatever it took, his crew would keep them safe. They would figure out this mystery. They would give these children a chance at a future. He just didn't know yet how much those 12 small aliens were about to change everything on his ship, how they would turn a military vessel into something that felt like home, how their simple preference for stolen sandwiches over prepared meals would reveal something profound about family and belonging. But he would learn. They all would. Dr. Linda Hayes stood in the laboratory surrounded by screens showing chemical data. She had been studying both the nutrient paste and the human food for hours. The numbers confused her. Nothing made sense. Commander Morrison entered with Dr. Rodriguez, Helen Martinez, and Amy Chen. They all wanted answers. "The nutrient paste is better in every way," Linda began her explanation. "It has more protein, better vitamins, all the minerals their bodies need. I designed it specifically for their biology. Then why won't they eat it?" Amy asked. She had spent most of the previous night in the medical bay with the cubs. The pale one, who Amy had started calling Pearl, barely left her side now. Linda brought up a new screen. "I started comparing everything they eat, every piece of human food they've touched, and I found something strange." The screen showed complex molecular structures rotating slowly. Human food, especially cooked food, has something the nutrient paste doesn't have. We call them Maillard compounds. They form when we cook food, when we brown meat or toast bread. They create most of the flavors we love in prepared meals. "So they just like the taste better?" Helen asked. "It's more than taste," Linda said. She pulled up images of brain scans. I ran scans while the cubs were smelling different foods. Watch what happens with the nutrient paste. The brain scan showed minimal activity, just basic response to scent. "Now watch with human food," Linda continued. The difference was dramatic. Large sections of the cubs' brains lit up. Not just smell centers, but areas linked to memory and emotion and social connections. They're not just smelling food, Linda explained. They're smelling home, safety, family. The Maillard compounds trigger deep memories in their brains. The room went quiet as everyone absorbed this information. Dr. Rodriguez spoke first. Their world had cooked food. Their families prepared meals for them. Exactly, Linda confirmed. Kelvar 7 wasn't always dying. These children grew up eating real food made by people who loved them. To them, the smell of cooked food doesn't just mean nutrition. It means someone is taking care of them. Amy felt tears in her eyes. And the nutrient paste? Smells like nothing, Linda said softly. Like medicine. Like being alone and scared. Their brains register it as survival rations, not as real food. Not as love. Jake ran his hand through his hair. So when they smell our sandwiches and our cooking, they smell what their parents used to make, Linda finished. They smell being cared for. Right now, that matters more to them than perfect nutrition. Helen looked troubled. But human food isn't made for their biology. Won't there be problems if they keep eating it? Dr. Rodriguez pulled up his own data. I've been monitoring their health closely. They're doing well. Better than I expected, actually. Human food isn't perfect for them, but it's working. Their bodies can process it. They're gaining weight. Their energy levels are improving. There's something else, Linda added. She looked almost surprised by her own findings. I compared their biology to human children. There are similarities we wouldn't normally expect between unrelated species. What kind of similarities? Jake asked. Developmental patterns, the way they grow and learn, what their bodies need, how they form social bonds. Linda displayed comparison charts. It's like both species evolved along similar paths, not identical but close enough that our food works for them. And more importantly, our way of caring for children works for them. Amy moved closer to the screens. What do you mean? Calvari raised their young in family groups, Linda explained. They cook together, eat together, use shared meals as a way to bond and connect. The cubs aren't just hungry for food. They're hungry for that family experience. When they see us eating, when they smell our cooking, it triggers all those social and emotional needs. Jake thought back to how Blue had stolen Greg's sandwich. The cub hadn't taken food from his own plate, even though it was right there. He wanted Greg's food. The food an adult was eating. Food that meant safety and care. So every time they take food from our plates, Jake said slowly, they're trying to feel like part of a family again. Yes, Linda confirmed. They're trying to belong to someone. Helen was quiet for a moment. What do we do? We can't just let them grab food from everyone, but we also can't force them to eat something that makes them feel alone. We change our approach, Jake decided. Helen, work with Linda. Create meal plans using human food. Make it appropriate for their biology if needed, but keep it real. Cooked, flavorful, the way we'd feed human children. And serve it family style? Amy suggested. Not like medical rations. Jake nodded. Exactly. If they need family meals to feel safe, that's what we'll give them. We'll set up a proper dining area. Crew members can volunteer to eat with them. Make it feel normal. I'll volunteer for every meal, Amy said immediately. You'll have competition, Dr. Rodriguez told her with a smile. Half the crew has been asking to visit them. As the meeting ended, Linda stopped Jake. Commander, there's one more thing. My research suggests that this bonding, this family structure isn't just nice for them. It might be necessary. Kelvari children who grow up without strong social connections show serious developmental problems. Jake understood the weight of what she was saying. They don't just need food. They need to belong to someone. Yes, Linda said quietly. They need to feel like they matter. Like they're important to someone. Otherwise, even with perfect nutrition, they might not recover from losing their world. Jake looked toward the medical bay where 12 small aliens were learning to trust again. Then we'll make sure they know they matter. We saved them. Now we help them heal. The changes began immediately. The medical bay was transformed. Crew members brought colorful blankets and pictures for the walls. Someone found soft toys that the cubs claimed as their own. And in the center of the room, they placed a large table with chairs. The next morning, Greg arrived carrying breakfast. He set the table with 13 plates. One for himself and one for each cub. Real plates, not medical trays. Real food, not paste. Scrambled eggs, toast, fruit, and juice. Breakfast time, he announced, sitting down. The cubs watched him carefully. They had grown used to stealing food. The idea of being given their own portions seemed strange to them. Blue stood first. He approached the table slowly, looking at the plate set before an empty chair. Then he looked at Greg, asking permission without words. "It's yours," Greg said gently. "You don't have to take it. We're giving it to you." Blue climbed into the chair. One by one, the other cubs followed. Pearl needed help reaching her seat. Katie lifted her easily, settling her with a plate of food cut into small pieces. Greg picked up his fork and began eating. The cubs watched and copied him. Some used the forks. Others used their hands. Greg didn't correct them. They were eating. That was what mattered. Amy arrived with her own breakfast halfway through the meal. "Can I join you?" Pearl's eyes brightened. She reached out with both small hands. Amy sat beside her, and Pearl immediately leaned against her side. She ate her fruit while pressing close to Amy's warmth. "I think she's adopted you," Greg observed. "I think they've adopted all of us," Amy replied, gently stroking Pearl's soft fur. Over the next few days, more crew members joined the meals. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. No cub ever ate alone. There was always at least one human at the table, usually more. They shared food and talked and laughed together. The cubs began to change. Their fur became shiny and healthy. They gained weight. They played games between meals, running around the medical bay with energy they hadn't shown before. They even started learning English words, picking up the language quickly, but they remained picky about their food. Lieutenant Sam Porter learned this when he tried serving leftovers that had been sitting too long. The cubs took one sniff and turned their heads away. They waited, staring at him expectantly. "You're little critics, aren't you?" Sam muttered, but he was smiling. He went back to the kitchen and prepared fresh food. The cubs ate with enthusiasm. Dr. Rodriguez documented everything. The cubs' health improved dramatically. But more impressive was the psychological change. Video from the first day compared to now showed completely different children. They laughed. They played. They climbed into laps looking for attention. "They're acting like normal children," Jake observed, watching the footage. "They are normal children," Rodriguez replied. "They were just traumatized. The routine, the shared meals, the affection from the crew, it's helping them heal." "Any problems?" Jake asked. Rodriguez hesitated. "Just one. They're getting very attached to specific crew members. Pearl follows Amy everywhere. Blue waits at the door for Greg. When we reach the station tomorrow and transfer them to refugee services, it's going to be hard on them." Jake had been thinking about this problem. They were now one day from Station Valeria. Refugee Council representatives would take the cubs there. It was standard procedure. The right thing to do according to regulations, but it felt wrong. Very wrong. That evening, Jake ate dinner in the medical bay. All 12 cubs were there with 6 crew members. The table was crowded and loud with the sounds of eating and talking and laughter. Pearl sat in Amy's lap, eating chicken that Amy cut into small pieces for her. Blue leaned against Greg's shoulder, occasionally stealing bites from his plate even though his own was full. The other cubs had claimed their favorite humans too. Jake looked through the window at the dinner table. Pearl had fallen asleep in Amy's arms. Amy was talking quietly with Greg while both looked down at the sleeping cub with tender care. "These kids have lost everything," Helen continued. "Their world, their families, everything they knew. And somehow on this ship, they've started to heal. Do we really want to take that away from them?" Jake thought about refugee centers. He had visited some during his career. They weren't bad places. The staff tried hard. But they were crowded. Hundreds of displaced people all needing help. Children would be one face among many. Here, every crew member knew each cub's name. They knew Pearl liked apples best. That Blue always waited by the door. That Copper fell asleep during meals. These weren't just rescued refugees. They were individuals. They were loved. "It would be complicated," Jake said slowly. "We'd need approval from Fleet Command. Educational programs. Legal guardianship protocols. The best things usually are complicated," Helen replied. Jake made his decision. "Draft a proposal. I'll contact Fleet Command tonight. We'll call it a trial program. Cultural exchange or species integration study. Whatever official language makes it work," Helen smiled. "And the real reason?" "The real reason," Jake said, "is that those kids have been through hell. They've lost everything, and on this ship with this crew, they've found something precious again. I won't be the one who takes that away." He turned to Helen. "Poll the crew. Everyone needs to understand what this means. This isn't a temporary rescue anymore. This would be permanent. These cubs would be part of our ship's company. Everyone needs to agree. Already did an informal poll, Helen admitted. Every single crew member said yes. Jake shook his head, but he was smiling. Of course they did. That night he composed a message to Fleet Command. He explained the situation carefully, the Cubs' unique needs, the successful care arrangement, the psychological benefits of stability. He outlined education plans, medical protocols, and resource requirements. He attached a photo to the message. The dinner table in the medical bay, 12 alien children and 6 humans sharing a meal, everyone looking content. Everyone clearly family. He hit send and hoped Fleet Command would understand. The transformation of the medical bay continued over the next day. What had been a clinical space became something warmer. Crew members donated personal items. Pictures went up on walls. Colorful blankets covered beds. The Cubs claimed toys and books as their own. The large dining table became the center of their world. 3 times a day, Cubs and humans gathered there to eat together. The routine provided structure and comfort. Lieutenant Greg Barnes had become Blue's favorite person. The cobalt-furred cub followed him everywhere when possible. During breakfast, Blue sat in the chair next to Greg's, occasionally stealing food from his plate even when his own was full. "You're going to make me go hungry," Greg teased, but he always let Blue take what he wanted. He understood now that it wasn't really about the food. It was about connection. Amy Chen had a similar relationship with Pearl. The smallest cub barely left her side. During meals, Pearl usually sat in Amy's lap, content to be held while she ate. She was learning English quickly, pointing at things and asking, "What that?" in her small voice. Katie Sullivan had claimed or been claimed by Copper and 2 other cubs. They followed her during her medical rounds, trying to help even when they didn't understand what she was doing. During meals, at least one of them sat pressed against her side. The other cubs formed bonds with other crew members. Lieutenant Sam Porter found himself adopted by a pair of siblings who refused to be separated. Nurse Chris became the favorite of 3 cubs who loved when he read stories. Engineer Lisa had 2 cubs who watched her work with fascination. Every crew member who volunteered for mealtime found themselves important to at least one cub. The children were forming attachments quickly, building trust with the humans who fed them and cared for them. Dr. Rodriguez watched this bonding with both joy and concern. The cubs were healing beautifully, but they were also becoming deeply connected to specific people. If they had to leave the ship, the separation would hurt them. He shared his concerns with Jake. "They're attaching to us like we're their family now. That's healthy for their development, but if we can't keep them, this is going to traumatize them all over again." "I know," Jake said. "That's why I'm fighting to keep them here. We started this. We need to finish it." Meanwhile, the ship approached Station Valeria. Jake received a response from Fleet Command. It wasn't the answer he hoped for. "They want more information," he told his senior staff. "They're concerned about precedent, about regulations. They've sent the request to the Galactic Refugee Council for their input." "What does that mean for the Cubs?" Amy asked, worried. "It means we wait," Jake replied. "The council will review our proposal. They'll send an inspector to evaluate the situation. Until then, the Cubs stay with us." "And if the council says no?" Katie asked quietly. Nobody wanted to answer that question. The ship docked at Station Valeria on schedule. But instead of transferring the Cubs, they remained aboard while the bureaucratic process played out. Days turned into a week. The Cubs settled deeper into their routine, unaware their future hung in balance. They attended learning sessions with Ben Taylor, the ship's education officer. He adapted lessons for their learning style, teaching them English and math and science through games and activities. The Cubs learned quickly, their young minds absorbing information. They played in a converted cargo bay that the crew had turned into a recreation area. Soft mats covered the floor. Climbing structures and toys filled the space. The Cubs ran and played with energy that would have seemed impossible during those first desperate days. They ate every meal at the big table, surrounded by humans who had become their family in everything but name. One evening, a stranger came aboard the ship. Director Venn of the Galactic Refugee Council arrived for his inspection. He was a Trell, a species known for following rules strictly. His expression suggested he expected to find problems. What he found was breakfast. The medical bay looked different from a typical ship's medical facility. The dining table dominated the center. 12 cubs and 5 crew members sat together eating and talking. Pearl was in Amy's lap, practicing reading from a digital tablet. Blue sat next to Greg, occasionally stealing bacon from his plate. Director Ven, Jake greeted him formally. Welcome aboard. You've arrived just in time for morning meal. Ven's eyes moved across the room, taking in every detail. The cubs glanced at him with curiosity but no fear. They were more interested in their food than the stranger. This is their normal routine? Ven asked. Every day, Jake confirmed. Shared meals are important for their psychological well-being. It helps them feel secure. Part of a family structure. Interesting, Ven said neutrally. He approached the table slowly. Blue looked up at him, then deliberately took a piece of bacon from Greg's plate despite having his own. Greg laughed and gently touched Blue's head. They still take food from you? Ven observed. Sometimes, Greg admitted. Usually when they want attention or reassurance. It's a bonding behavior. Dr. Rodriguez believes it's healthy for their development. I have medical reports prepared, Dr. Rodriguez said, appearing with his data tablet. Comprehensive health assessments on all 12 children. Would you like to review them now or after observing their routine? After, Ven decided. I prefer to see first, analyze later. The inspection continued for hours. Ven followed the cubs through their entire day. He watched their learning session with Ben, where they practiced writing and solving simple math problems. He observed their playtime in the cargo bay, seeing how they interacted with each other and with crew members. He watched Pearl's complete trust in Amy, how the small cub reached for her whenever uncertain. He saw Blue's confidence, how he had become a leader among the other cubs. He noticed Copper fall and scrape his knee, then run immediately to Katie for both medical care and comfort. What seemed to interest him most was how naturally the crew integrated child care into their regular duties. Engineer Lisa worked on a control panel, while simultaneously helping 2 cubs with a puzzle. Navigator Chris took his break to read stories to 4 cubs gathered around him. The crew didn't treat childcare as a burden. They treated it as part of life aboard the ship. At one point, Pearl tugged on Ven's sleeve. He looked down in surprise. Book? She asked in careful English, holding up a digital reader. She's asking if you'll read to her. Amy translated, standing nearby. She loves stories, but if you're busy... No, Ven said quietly. I can read. He sat down and Pearl immediately climbed into his lap as if it were natural. She handed him the reader and waited. Ven began reading a simple story about a lost star finding its way home. Pearl listened carefully, sometimes pointing at pictures and asking, "What that?" When the story ended, Pearl yawned and leaned back against Ven's chest. She fell asleep, trusting him completely even though they had just met. They do that, Amy said softly. They trust easily now. They've learned they're safe here, that adults around them care. How do they handle losing their world? Ven asked, still holding Pearl carefully. Their families? They remember, Dr. Rodriguez said, joining the conversation. We don't hide the truth, but we've created an environment where they can grieve safely while building new connections. It's healthy according to every psychological model we have. Ven looked around the medical bay with different eyes now. He saw the decorations the cubs made in art class, photos on the wall showing them with various crew members, blankets and toys and personal items that made this space theirs. This isn't temporary for you, he observed. You see this as permanent. Yes, Jake admitted. These children are part of our crew now, part of our family. We're committed to raising them, educating them, giving them the best future we can. On a military vessel, Ven pointed out. In deep space. Is that worse than a refugee center where they'd be one of hundreds? Amy asked gently. Here they have individual attention, people who know their names, their preferences, their fears and joys. They have stability and love. Ven was quiet for a long moment. Pearl shifted in Ven's arms, still sleeping. He looked down at her, then back at the crew members, watching him carefully. I need to see your educational curriculum, he said finally. Your long-term care plans, emergency protocols involving the children. Of course, Jake said. Everything is documented. The inspection continued into evening. Ven reviewed files and interviewed crew members. He examined every aspect of the cubs' care with thorough attention. He was professional and gave no hint of his final decision. At dinner, he joined the meal at the large table. The cubs had grown comfortable with him throughout the day. Copper tried to take food from his plate. Ven allowed it with what might have been amusement. Blue showed him a drawing from art class, clearly proud of his work. After the cubs settled for the night, each in their chosen sleeping spot with their preferred crew member nearby, Ven met with Jake in his office. "Your crew is remarkable," Ven said without introduction. "Their dedication is obvious. The children are thriving by every standard we measure." "But," Jake prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. "But this situation is unprecedented," Ven continued. "The council has protocols for good reasons. Children need stability, structure, professional care." "They have all that here," Jake argued. "They have more than that," Ven corrected. "They have love. Real, unconditional love from people who've chosen to make them family." He pulled up his data tablet and made notes. "I'm approving the pilot program. 1 year with quarterly inspections. The cubs remain on Horizon's Hope under your crew's care, with council oversight. You'll maintain detailed records and meet all educational and medical standards." Jake felt relief wash through him. "We will. Thank you, Director." "Don't thank me," Ven said. "Prove me right. Show the council this unorthodox approach works, because if it does, you might establish a new model for refugee care. One based on family instead of efficiency." After Ven left the ship, Jake gathered his crew to share the news. The medical bay erupted in quiet celebration, careful not to wake the sleeping cubs. "We did it," Amy whispered, tears in her eyes. "They get to stay. For a year," Jake cautioned. "We have to prove this is the right place for them." "It is the right place," Katie said firmly, "because we love them and they love us. That's what makes a family." Greg looked down at Blue, who had woken during the celebration. The cub leaned against his leg sleepily. "Hey, buddy," Greg whispered. "You're staying. This is your home now." Blue looked up at him, understanding more than he could say in English. Then he smiled and wrapped his small arms around Greg's leg in a tight hug. The following months brought new routines and new growth. The cubs continued learning English rapidly. They picked up other skills too: math and science and history. They learned about human culture and shared stories about their own lost world. Ben Taylor developed a comprehensive curriculum that mixed human and Kelvari knowledge. He taught them to read and write in both English and their native language, preserving their heritage while integrating them into the ship's culture. The cubs grew physically too. They gained weight and height. Their fur became thick and glossy. They ran and played with boundless energy. The weak, traumatized children from those first days were gone, replaced by healthy, happy youngsters. The dinner table remained the heart of their community. Every evening, humans and Kelvari gathered to share food and conversation and laughter. It was where they connected, where they felt like family. Pearl grew more confident, but still preferred sitting near Amy during meals. Blue became tall for his age, though he still occasionally stole food from Greg's plate just to make him laugh. Copper earned a reputation as the ship's unofficial greeter, welcoming visitors with enthusiasm. All 12 cubs flourished in different ways. Some showed talent for art, others loved science. A few were natural leaders. Each developed their own personality, their own interests, their own place in the ship's family. Director Ven returned for his first quarterly inspection 3 months later. He found cubs who were thriving even more than during his previous visit. Their English was fluent now. They participated in ship activities. They had friends among both the cubs and the crew. "Remarkable progress," Ven noted, reviewing the educational and medical reports. "They're developing well ahead of projections." "They have good teachers," Jake said, "and people who care about them." Ven spent 2 days observing before submitting his report to the council. His conclusion was clear: the pilot program was succeeding beyond expectations. Word of Horizon's Hope began spreading through the fleet. Other ships inquired about similar programs. The precedent Jake had worried about setting was becoming reality, but in a positive way. The fleet was rethinking how it handled refugee children. Not as cargo to be transferred, but as individuals who needed family and stability and love. By the 6-month mark, The cubs were fully integrated into ship life. They attended classes in the morning, played in the afternoon, and helped with simple tasks around the ship. They felt useful, important, part of something. The crew continued volunteering for meals and activities. Nobody saw it as duty anymore. It was just life. Having cubs at the dinner table was normal. Reading bedtime stories was normal. Helping with homework was normal. They were family. Admiral Patricia Collins herself came for an inspection at the 9-month mark. She was the fleet commander who had initially approved Jake's request. She wanted to see the results firsthand. What she found impressed her deeply. She watched the cubs in class, answering questions and working on projects. She observed them at play, seeing their joy and confidence. She joined them for dinner, experiencing the warmth and connection at that central table. "This is what good looks like," she told Jake privately. "You've created something special here. These children aren't just surviving, they're thriving." "It's not just me," Jake said. "It's the entire crew. Everyone contributes." "That's what makes it work," the Admiral agreed. "You've built a real community, a family that includes everyone regardless of species." She made her decision before leaving. "I'm recommending the program become permanent. No more yearly trial. Horizon's Hope becomes the official home for these cubs until they reach adulthood." She paused. "And I'm authorizing expansion. If you're willing, your ship can take in more refugee children who need this kind of care. Other species, similar circumstances. You've proven the model works." Jake thought carefully before answering. "I'll need to discuss it with the crew. This is their family too. Everyone needs to agree." "Fair enough," the Admiral said. "But I hope they say yes. What you've accomplished here could change how the entire fleet handles vulnerable children." The crew meeting that night was emotional. Jake explained the Admiral's offer. They could keep the cubs permanently, and they could help more children if they chose. "What do you all think?" Jake asked. Amy spoke first. "Pearl is my daughter in every way that matters. I want her to stay. And if there are other children who need what we can give, how can we say no?" Greg nodded. "Blue means everything to me. I'm committed to seeing him grow up. And yeah, we've got room for more. We've got love for more." Katie agreed. "Taking care of these cubs has been the most meaningful thing I've done in my career. If we can help more children, we should." One by one, every crew member voiced support. Some had tears in their eyes. All were committed. "Then it's unanimous," Jake said. "We tell the Admiral yes. This is who we are now. A ship that rescues children and gives them a family." The official approval came within days. Horizon's Hope was redesignated as a deep space vessel with dual mission, standard operations and refugee childcare. Additional resources were allocated. The program was made permanent. The cubs celebrated in their own way. They didn't fully understand all the bureaucratic details. What they understood was that they were staying. This was home. These humans were their family. During dinner that night, Pearl climbed into Amy's lap as usual. But instead of just eating, she wrapped her small arms around Amy's neck. "Mama," she whispered in English. It was the first time she had used that word. Amy held her close, crying happy tears. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm your mama now." Around the table, similar moments happened. Cubs using words like family and home and stay. Understanding finally that they weren't temporary guests. They belonged here. Jake watched his crew and the cubs together. He thought about that first day when Blue had stolen Greg's sandwich. How that simple act had revealed what these children really needed. Not just food, but family. Not just care, but love. They had taken 12 traumatized orphans from a dying world and given them a future. Not in a refugee center or institution, but in a real home with people who loved them. And now they would do it again for others who needed the same thing. 3 weeks later, Horizon's Hope received a distress call. A transport ship carrying refugees had suffered life support failure. Among the passengers were 6 children from a species called the Nari. Small, furry beings not unlike the Kelvary cubs. "We're closest ship in range," the communications officer reported. "Estimated arrival in 4 hours. Jake looked at his crew. They looked back at him with determination. "Set course," Jake ordered. "Let's go get those kids." Amy stood up from the table where she had been helping Pearl with homework. "I'll prepare beds in the medical bay. I'll work on food options," Helen said. "We'll figure out what they need." Katie gathered medical supplies. Greg and others prepared for the rescue operation. Everyone knew their role. Everyone was ready. The 12 Kelvari cubs watched the activity with interest. Blue approached Jake carefully. "More cubs coming?" he asked in English. "Yes," Jake confirmed. 6 children who need help. They need a home." Blue nodded seriously. Then he smiled. "We help, we family. We share." And that, Jake thought, was exactly right. They were family, and family made room for those who needed love. The rescue of the 6 Nari children went smoothly. Like the Kelvari cubs before them, these children were frightened and weak. But this time the crew of Horizon's Hope knew exactly what to do. The medical bay welcomed the newcomers with warm beds and gentle care. Katie and Dr. Rodriguez worked quickly to stabilize them. Helen prepared food options, testing different combinations until she found what worked for Nari biology, and the 12 Kelvari cubs helped in their own way. Blue approached one of the Nari children, a small gray creature huddled in fear. He sat down nearby, not too close, just present. Then he started talking softly in English, sharing simple words and showing his own meal. The Nari child watched him cautiously. Blue took a bite of his sandwich, then broke off a piece and offered it. The Nari child hesitated, then accepted the food. A small connection formed. Pearl did similar work with the youngest Nari, a tiny being who wouldn't stop crying. Pearl climbed into the bed beside her and started humming, a Kelvari lullaby her own mother had once sung. The Nari child slowly quieted, comforted by another child who understood loss. Over the following days, the pattern repeated. The Kelvari cubs became ambassadors and helpers. They showed the new children that the humans were safe, that the food was good, that this place could be home. "They're teaching them to trust," Amy observed, watching Pearl guide a Nari child to the dinner table. "They remember what it was like to be scared. Now they're helping others feel safe." The Nari children began to settle in. Like the Kelvari before them, they preferred human food over synthesized alternatives. They responded to the family meal structure. They formed attachments with crew members. The dining table expanded to accommodate 18 children now, plus the crew members who ate with them. It was crowded and noisy and wonderful. Ben Taylor adjusted his curriculum to include both Kelvari and Nari students. They learned together, played together, and slowly became a mixed group of siblings rather than separate species. Director Venn arrived for his scheduled inspection and found the expanded family thriving. "You've integrated the new arrivals successfully," he noted. "I wasn't sure it would work with multiple species." "Children are children," Jake replied, "regardless of what they look like. They all need the same basic things: food, safety, love, and a place to belong." Venn's report praised the program enthusiastically. The Galactic Refugee Council began recommending other ships adopt similar models. Horizon's Hope became a training example for fleet vessels interested in refugee childcare. Months turned into years. The original 12 Kelvari cubs grew from traumatized youngsters into confident adolescents. The 6 Nari children followed the same path. More children arrived over time, different species, different circumstances, but all needing the same thing: family. The ship's culture evolved to accommodate them. Education programs expanded. Recreation areas were enhanced. The medical bay became a true living space rather than a clinical facility. But the dinner table remained at the center of everything. Every evening, humans and aliens of various species gathered to share meals and conversation. It was where they connected, where they became family. Pearl grew into a thoughtful teenager who loved learning. She still sat near Amy during meals, though she no longer needed to be in her lap. She helped younger children adjust to ship life just as Blue had once helped her. Blue became tall and strong, a natural leader among the cubs. He still occasionally stole food from Greg's plate, making both of them laugh. It was their private joke, their special connection. He trained to join the crew eventually, wanting to help rescue more children. Copper developed a talent for engineering, spending hours with Lisa learning about the ship's systems. Katie's other cubs pursued different interests. Some loved art. Others preferred science or languages or athletics. Each child found their own path while remaining part of the family. Years passed. The original Cubs approached adulthood. Some chose to stay on Horizon's Hope as crew members. Others wanted to explore the galaxy, to find their own paths. But they all knew they had a home to return to. The day Blue officially joined the crew as a junior officer was emotional for everyone. He wore his uniform with pride, standing beside Greg during the ceremony. When Jake pinned the insignia on his chest, Blue's eyes shone. "Thank you," Blue said to the assembled crew. His English was perfect now, years of practice making him fluent. "You saved my life. You gave me a home. You showed me what family means." He looked at Greg specifically. "You taught me that family isn't about biology. It's about choice. About showing up. About stealing food off each other's plates." The crowd laughed at that. Greg had tears in his eyes. "I'm going to spend my life doing what you did for me," Blue continued. "Helping children who need family. Giving them what you gave me, hope." Pearl chose a different path. She wanted to become a teacher, to work with refugee children across the galaxy. Amy supported her decision completely, even though it meant Pearl would leave the ship. "I'll come back to visit," Pearl promised during their last dinner together before her departure. "This will always be home. You'll always be my mother." "I know," Amy said, holding her close, "and I'm so proud of who you've become." As Pearl prepared to leave, she paused at the dining table. She ran her hand along the surface, remembering all the meals shared there, all the conversations and laughter and love. "This is where it all started," she said softly. "When you let us take food from your plates. When you showed us we belonged." She looked at Amy with tears in her eyes. "I was so scared, so alone. And you made me feel safe again, just by sharing your food, by making me part of your family." "You were always part of our family," Amy replied. "From the moment you looked at me in that shelter on Kelvar 7, I knew you were meant to be my daughter." Pearl hugged her tightly. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart." The program on Horizon's Hope continued and expanded. Over the years, they helped hundreds of children. Different species, different backgrounds, different needs. But the approach remained the same. Family meals, individual attention, love and stability. Other ships adopted the model. The fleet established official protocols based on what Horizon's Hope had pioneered. Refugee childcare evolved from institutional processing to family-based integration. Director Venn, who had once been skeptical, became the program's biggest advocate. He used his position on the council to promote family-based care across the galaxy. The Trell who loved protocols had learned that sometimes the most important protocol was simply to love. Jake eventually retired from active command, but he stayed involved in the program. He trained other commanders, teaching them what he had learned, that sometimes the best leadership meant making space for love, that regulations mattered less than compassion. That family could form in the most unexpected ways. A journalist came to interview him years later, wanting to know about the program's origins. They sat in the dining area, now much larger than the original table but still serving the same purpose. "What made it work?" the journalist asked. "Why did this succeed when traditional approaches often fail?" Jake thought carefully before answering. "We didn't treat them like refugees or victims or charity cases. We treated them like our children, like family." He gestured around the room where current Cubs were eating dinner with crew members. Laughter and conversation filled the space. They refused the rations on their trays because those rations were impersonal, clinical. When they took food from our plates, they were saying, "I want to belong to you. I want to be part of your family." And we said yes. "That simple?" the journalist asked. "That simple," Jake confirmed. "And that complicated. Because saying yes meant commitment. It meant rearranging our lives. It meant loving children who weren't ours by birth but became ours by choice." He smiled, remembering Blue's first stolen sandwich. Pearl's tiny hands reaching for Amy. Copper falling asleep at the dinner table. All those moments that had built into something beautiful. "We saved their lives in the rescue," Jake said. "But they saved us too. They taught us what really matters. Not regulations or protocols or efficiency, but love, family, belonging." The journalist published the story widely. It inspired more ships, more programs, more families forming across species lines. The model spread beyond the fleet to civilian organizations and colony worlds. But Horizon's Hope remained special. It was where it all started. Where 12 traumatized Cubs had refused synthesized food, and instead claimed their places at the human family table, where they had healed and grown and learned to love again. In the following decades, the original cubs scattered across the galaxy. They pursued careers and dreams and adventures, but they stayed connected to each other and to the ship that had become their home. They gathered every few years for reunions, bringing their own families. Blue returned with his partner and children. Pearl brought students she was mentoring. Copper came with engineering innovations he wanted to show Lisa. They sat at the dining table, now old enough to span multiple generations, and shared meals like they had when they were young. They told stories about those early days, about being scared and alone, about humans who had fed them and loved them. "Do you remember?" Blue asked during one reunion. "When I stole Greg's sandwich that first time?" "I remember," Greg replied, older now but still strong. "You looked at me like you expected me to take it back, like you thought you'd be punished." "I was so hungry," Blue said. "But more than that, I was lonely, desperate to feel like I mattered to someone." "You mattered," Greg said firmly. "From that first moment. You all did." Pearl smiled at Amy, holding her own young daughter in her lap. "I named her Amy," she said, "after you, so she'll know about the human who saved me and loved me and taught me what family means." Amy's eyes filled with tears. "I'm honored." Around the table, similar conversations happened. Children sharing memories with the adults who had raised them. Grandchildren learning about the program that had started it all. Stories being passed down about how family could form in the most unexpected ways. The reunion lasted a week. Cubs, now adults, slept in their old spaces and ate at the familiar table. They helped with current children, showing them that the scared cubs they once were could become confident adults. On the last night, they gathered one final time at the table. Jake, now very old but still sharp, stood to speak. "When we rescued you from Kelvar 7, he said, looking at the original 12, "I thought we were just saving lives. I didn't understand we were starting something so much bigger." He looked around at the full table. Original cubs with their families. Current cubs learning and growing. Crew members who had dedicated their lives to this work. "You taught us that the greatest thing we can do isn't rescue. It's love. You taught us that family isn't defined by species or biology. It's defined by choice and commitment and showing up for each other." He raised his glass. "To family, however it forms, wherever we find it." "To family," everyone echoed. They ate together one more time, sharing food and stories and love. When the meal ended and the reunion concluded, the original cubs returned to their various lives across the galaxy, but they carried with them the knowledge that they had a home, a family, a place they belonged. And on Horizon's Hope, new cubs continued to arrive. New children who needed what the Kelvari and Nari had once needed: food and safety, and most importantly, family. The dining table remained at the center of it all, where traumatized children learned to trust again, where they discovered they mattered, where they understood that being part of a family wasn't about who gave birth to you, but about who chose to love you, where refusing rations and stealing food off plates became the first step toward healing and belonging and home. That was the legacy of Horizon's Hope. Not a ship that rescued refugees, but a place where children of all species learned that they deserved love, that they had value, that somewhere in the vast galaxy, there were people who would sit with them at a table and share not just food, but life itself. And it all started because 12 small cubs looked at human sandwiches and saw not just nutrition, but hope, safety, family, everything they had lost and everything they needed to find again. The story spread across the galaxy as a reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can offer isn't a perfect solution or an optimized protocol. Sometimes the most important thing is simply to pull up a chair, share your plate, and say, "You belong here. You're family now." That message changed how countless civilizations approached care for vulnerable children. But it started on one ship, with one commander willing to break protocols, with one crew willing to love, and with 12 brave cubs willing to trust again. The alien cubs had refused the rations on their trays. They had snatched food off the humans' plates instead. And in doing so, they had found their way home.